When a human broadcast mysteriously interrupts the airwaves, the world stands still in disbelief. The transmission, initially dismissed as an anomaly, turns into a harbinger of something far darker than imagined. As humanity grapples with this sudden, unexplainable event, the consequences begin to unfold, challenging every assumption about Earth's place in the cosmos. The hum of the transmission had been a low, almost imperceptible buzz at first. No one had thought much of it until the voices came through. Why does it know our language? The voice was distinct, dry, as if it belonged to someone who'd seen too much and cared too little. It echoed through the static, cutting through the noise like a knife. The broadcast wasn't scheduled. It wasn't even supposed to exist. The room went cold. Across the globe, millions paused their routines. Even the government, still recovering from the recent tensions, listened in awe. The strange anomaly that filled their secure channels. The world held its breath. Is it a joke? Someone asked aloud in an underground command center in Washington, their eyes scanning the data stream that continued to tick unnervingly. The response was a slow, deliberate laugh from another speaker. A shadowy figure in a control room somewhere hidden from public view. We thought we were watching a natural disaster. Now we're part of their game. They know us. And worse, a long pause. We don't know them. The silence that followed was thick, suffocating. It wasn't the kind of pause that offered contemplation. It was the kind of pause that made you think you had just heard the last words you would ever hear. Around the world, panic began to seep in. The first casualty was disbelief. No one knew how to respond. Was it just a rogue transmission, a glitch in the system? Or was it something far more complex, something that shouldn't be possible? The broadcast began again, and this time, its clarity was unnerving, clearer than anything they had heard before. "We are coming," it said. The voice, dispassionate as ever, seemed to stretch the syllables across the airwaves. "We will speak your language. We will know you better than you know yourselves. And when you fight back, you will lose." The words hung in the air like a death sentence, pulling at the very fabric of human understanding. The military system scrambled. Protocols were activated, and satellites were aimed in every direction, searching for a signal, for a source. But no trace was left, and that was before Earth even responded. The lights flickered, and across the world, every communication system hummed and buzzed in harmony. A glitch? No, this was no glitch. The human race was no longer in control of its narrative. The alien voice of presence had spoken, and it had made it clear. This wasn't a warning. It was a declaration. The radio silence that followed the broadcast felt like an eternity. An echo of finality lingered, like an aftershock waiting to strike. The broadcast didn't stop. It was only the beginning. At first, the military moved in force. They believed it was some sort of rogue group, possibly a terrorist faction using advanced technology. But there was no trace, no origin, nothing that could be tracked. Every lid turned to dust. The world, prepared for everything, was now blindsided. Who were they? A general muttered into a dark room, his voice quivering despite the stoic nature of his appearance. The screen flickered again. This time, a message appeared in an alien script. But beneath it, in simple, unmistakable English, "We know your weakness, and we are patient." The finality of the statement lingered, frozen in the minds of every human who had heard it. The world paused, not in anticipation, but in fear. Because for the first time in history, Earth was no longer at the center of the universe. In that instant, every system in place, the military, the sciences, the United Nations, all of them trembled. A singular thought emerged, unspoken but universally understood. What now? They thought it was mercy. It wasn't. The world didn't move. It didn't make a sound. It was as if time itself had frozen after the broadcast. The whole planet held its breath, and for those few moments, no one could have imagined what was coming next. Governments across the globe began scrambling for answers. Messages were sent, alerts were raised, and protocol followed. But nothing worked. Nothing could get them closer to understanding the alien transmission that had seized humanity's attention. In an underground facility in Washington, D.C., military officials sat in grim silence, their faces pale beneath the harsh artificial lights. The general at the head of the table slammed his fist on the surface, a forceful sound in the room that made the others jump. "We're missing something, people," he barked. "This isn't just some radio transmission. This is an attack. A warning. And we've done nothing but react." One of his aides spoke cautiously. "Sir, we've checked every communication system. We've called every ally, every nation. There's no record of any kind of strange activity, not a single trace of origin. It's as if it just appeared." "Impossible," the general muttered. "This isn't possible. Not with our technology. We would have detected something, anything. There's no way an unknown force could infiltrate our systems without us knowing. It's like they're toying with us." He stood, pacing with frustration. "This is not just a message. It's a warning, a challenge." The aide nodded. "And we don't even know who the enemy is yet." In another room, not far away, an emergency transmission was being routed to global leaders. The massive screen in front of them flickered to life, revealing a faceless individual with no distinguishable features. The person, if it was even human, wore a dark cloak, their face obscured in shadow. They didn't waste time with pleasantries. "The broadcast you received is only the beginning." The figure's voice came through clearly, its tone steady, unbothered. "You can continue searching for us if you wish, but the results will be the same. You will find nothing." A silence fell. Then another voice, this one older, more weathered, spoke up from the corner of the room. "What do you want from us?" The figure's lips curled, an almost imperceptible smile, but it was enough to send shivers down every spine in the room. "What do we want from you?" "We simply wanted to remind you of your place. We've watched for millennia, waiting for the day you'd reach far enough into the cosmos to finally notice us." There was an audible gasp among the leaders. The figure continued, "And now that you have, now that you've made your first move, we will make ours." The tension in the room became unbearable. "What does that mean?" someone asked, the question hanging heavy in the air. "We will show you how weak you truly are." The figure's voice dropped to a chilling whisper. "You think your power, your weapons, your systems are enough to defend you? They are nothing compared to what is coming." The transmission cut off abruptly, leaving the leaders staring at the blank screen, unable to process what they had just heard. The room was thick with uncertainty. They could feel it creeping through their bones, a heavy sense of impending doom they couldn't shake. Meanwhile, in the farthest corners of the world, people were reacting differently. The threat felt distant for many, surreal even. But to others, it was real. To others, it was a certainty they'd never expected. In an abandoned factory on the outskirts of Berlin, a group of civilian hackers were trying to make sense of the alien transmissions. They sat hunched over glowing monitors, typing furiously, their faces illuminated by the artificial blue light of the screens. They had intercepted other broadcasts, and every time they tried to decrypt the data, something new emerged, a signal that had been encoded in layers no human technology could recognize, no human language could understand. Until now, the hacker at the center of the group looked up, his eyes wide. I think we've cracked it." "What?" another hacker asked, his voice trembling. "What did you find?" "It's a sequence, a pattern, an algorithm," he said, eyes fixed. On the monitor. I believe it's telling us something. Something important. They leaned in closer, watching as the decoded message appeared in sharp contrast against the screen, forming in an ancient, complex script. Then, one of the words jumped out to them. It wasn't in the alien language. It was human Latin, in fact etched in clear, unmistakable letters. PERICULUM. A chill ran through the group, and silence descended once more. They'd known something was wrong. But now, it felt like they were standing on the edge of a precipice, looking down into the unknown. What does this mean? One of the hackers asked quietly. I think we need to get this information to the authorities, the leader of the group said, fear creeping into his voice. And fast. Across the ocean, in the heart of New York City, the public was starting to feel the pressure. The uncertainty in the air was palpable as news broadcasts and social media erupted with speculation, fear, and confusion. The world had never been more divided, but now the division seemed irrelevant compared to the looming threat. Is this the end? Someone typed in a message, their screen flashing with a harsh reflection of their own terror. What are they going to do? Another person responded. They've already done it. We're just waiting for the next shoe to drop. In the military control center, a countdown had begun. The hum of the machines grew louder as the minutes ticked by, and every officer present seemed to brace themselves for the unknown. A new wave of encrypted messages had come through, and they weren't sure what to make of them. Every intercepted transmission seemed to be warning them, or perhaps mocking them. A chilling realization hit. Whatever this was, it wasn't going to be an easy fight. The battle wasn't about technology. It was about something far deeper. We need to move, the general growled, slamming his fist against the table again. We don't have time to wait for them to make their next move. Across the room, a subordinate turned to face him. What if they don't make the first move? What if we're the ones who initiate the war? The general's face hardened, his gaze shifting from the screen to his men. Then we better be ready to finish it. In that moment, they all realized that nothing would ever be the same. The alien message had begun the countdown, but now, Earth's response would determine the fate of everything. Every corner of the world was now gripped in a fear unlike anything humanity had faced before. The silence was broken. Now it was a matter of surviving whatever came next. The hum of static echoed through the air, sending ripples of unease into every corner of the world. News stations were in chaos, social media was ablaze with unverified reports, and every military commander was locked in a room somewhere, trying to understand the unimaginable. The broadcast had ended, but the terror it had unleashed lingered. For the first time in history, humanity found itself on the receiving end of a threat it couldn't comprehend. There were no signs, no warnings. It was simply there, an alien force, observing, studying, and now moving toward them. Earth wasn't at the center of the universe anymore. It was a speck on a map, a mere blip in the eyes of something far beyond human understanding. In a darkened war room in Washington, D.C., General Harris stood before a flickering holographic map of the globe, his eyes darting over the lines that connected military bases, communications outposts, and satellite stations. The map showed no clear signs of alien movement, nothing that could be tracked. But that was the problem. The alien transmission hadn't left a trace. It was as if it came from nowhere. The silence that followed wasn't just a break in communication, it was an ominous quiet, the calm before a storm that no one had yet prepared for. Where are they? General Harris muttered to himself, gripping the edge of the table. The words seemed to echo through the empty room, a haunting reminder of how little they knew about the force they were facing. Beside him, Lieutenant Harlow, a young officer with a sharp mind and a cold demeanor, tapped her fingers on a digital console. trying to piece together the fragmented data from the intercepted transmission. The sound of her fingers clicking against the surface was the only noise in the room, a sharp contrast to the otherwise oppressive silence. "There's no pattern," she said, her voice flat. "It's almost like the message is deliberately blocking our ability to trace it." "Blocking?" Harris frowned, turning to face her. "How do you mean?" "I don't know, sir. It's like it's intentionally masking its origin. Every time we think we're getting a lead, it disappears. It's deliberately avoiding detection." She glanced at the map again. "We're dealing with something far beyond our understanding of technology. Are you telling me they can hide in plain sight?" The general's voice was growing louder, but it wasn't anger. It was fear, a rare emotion for someone of his stature. Fear of the unknown. Harlow didn't reply immediately, her fingers still dancing over the interface. "Yes, sir. And that's what terrifies me. Because if they can hide, they can strike. Without warning, and we'll never see it coming." Outside the room, the atmosphere was thick with the weight of uncertainty. The Pentagon had already reached out to every world leader. The United Nations was scrambling to form an emergency response. The message was clear. Earth had just been put on the map of an intergalactic civilization, and there was no way to know what that meant for their future. Meanwhile, in the vast control center of a secret facility in Russia, a similar scene was unfolding. Engineers, scientists, and military officials sat, eyes fixed on the screens in front of them, trying to decipher the alien script they had intercepted. The message that had come through was a direct challenge, and it echoed in the minds of everyone present. The alien's words were clear. "We know your weakness. We are patient." "What do we do now?" one of the engineers asked, his voice trembling. "Slightly. Do we fight back?" "How can we fight something we can't even locate?" The chief scientist, Dr. Alexei Ivanov, stood slowly, his face pale but determined. "We can't fight something we don't understand. We must learn, adapt, and prepare for what's to come." But how could humanity prepare for an enemy that seemed to anticipate their every move, to understand their language before they even responded? The thought itself was suffocating. The alien forces weren't just technologically advanced. They were psychologically prepared for humanity's every reaction. Every plan, every countermeasure, every weapon on Earth could be rendered useless if they couldn't figure out who or what they were dealing with. Meanwhile, the general public remained oblivious to the full extent of the danger. They'd heard the message, yes. They'd seen the news, the broadcasts. But it felt distant, surreal, almost like some kind of nightmare unfolding across the globe. Most people couldn't fathom what had just been revealed. They had no clue how vulnerable their world truly was. In a crowded cafe in Paris, a man sat scrolling through his phone, absently reading the latest updates about the broadcast. His mind wandered, distracted by the mundane details of his day, until he saw the words, "Earth has been targeted by an unknown alien force." His heart skipped a beat. His hands froze over the screen. He reread it again, his eyes wide with disbelief. What had been a whisper of fear in the corners of the world was now becoming a roar. People started talking online, in the streets, at dinner tables. Some were hopeful, imagining that the message might simply be a warning, not a direct threat. Others began preparing for the worst. Bunkers were stocked, weapons checked, and families huddled together, uncertain of what the next day would bring. But one thing was certain: humanity would never be the same. Earth was no longer just a blue planet spinning in the vastness of space. It was a target, a playing field for an intelligence far beyond its understanding. The arrogance of assuming their place in the universe had been shattered. Back at the command center, General Harris sat in front of a screen that was still blank, his mind racing. He knew one thing for sure: humanity had to be ready to respond. But how do you fight an enemy that can outthink you at every turn? Do you think they're watching us right now? Harlow's voice cut through his thoughts. The general didn't answer immediately. He didn't need to. The answer was in the air, hanging around them like a thick fog. Prepare for the worst, he finally said, his voice firm. And pray we're wrong. They weren't wrong. The countdown had already begun. The question now was, how long before it ended? The world had reached the point of no return. Every nation, every leader, every scientist had felt it, the suffocating pressure of impending doom. The transmissions had stopped, but the silence only deepened the fear. It wasn't the absence of sound that was terrifying. It was the weight of knowing something far beyond human comprehension was watching, waiting for the right moment to strike. In Washington, D.C., General Harris stood before the war room's central holographic table, his face grim. The map before him was no longer just a display of global military assets, it was a map of survival. He could feel the sweat gathering at the back of his neck, but he refused to wipe it away. His soldiers were depending on him. The world was depending on him. Anything? He asked Lieutenant Harlow, his voice quieter than before. Harlow, who had been tirelessly working on a new decryption system, looked up, her eyes sunken from lack of sleep. She shook her head, her expression taut with frustration. Nothing. Sir, every scan, every probe, it's like they've erased themselves from existence. They can't be traced. Not by us, anyway. Harris slammed his fist on the table. Damn it, this isn't a coincidence. They're toying with us. It's a game. Or worse, a test, Harlow added, her voice barely above a whisper. The room fell silent. The idea that this was a test made the situation even worse. The idea that their enemy might be simply playing with them, seeing how they would react to the unknown, made every human action seem insignificant, irrelevant. The might of Earth's military, the years of development in technology and weaponry, meant nothing if they were merely being studied by an entity that already knew the outcome. As the days stretched into weeks, the world tried to prepare. Governments increased their defenses. Shelters were reinforced. People were told to remain calm, but the calm was a lie. People knew. They knew something was coming. They could feel it in the air, in the way the wind whispered secrets they couldn't understand. And then one night, the world's worst nightmare came true. It began with a ripple of distortion in the sky. The clouds, which had been thick and heavy with the threat of rain, suddenly twisted and swirled in unnatural patterns. The stars above blinked out, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. And then, in a flash that was too bright for any human eye to bear, the sky tore open. A massive vessel, larger than any human-made object ever conceived, emerged from the tier. It was silent, looming in the night, a shadow against the dying stars. Its shape was unlike anything seen before, a geometric structure, sharp and angular, yet pulsing with an eerie, almost organic glow. It hovered above Earth, still as death. Watching the chaos unfold below. In moments, the world's communication systems went dark. The internet, the radio, television, everything was wiped out in an instant. The entire planet was cut off from one another. A single message flickered across the globe before all screens went black. We are here. You are not ready. General? Harris stared at the flickering message on the last operational screen in the command center. His hands trembled, and for the first time, he felt small. Are we ready for this? He muttered to no one in particular. In Paris, the streets erupted in panic. In Tokyo, sirens wailed as people ran for shelter. In Johannesburg, families clung to one another, uncertain of what was to come. Earth had long since underestimated the vastness of space, and now it was paying the price. The alien ship remained silent, watching as humanity crumbled under the weight of its own fear. But something shifted. In that moment, something unexpected happened, something that humanity had not yet fully realized about itself. In the face of destruction, Earth did not bow. The collective strength of human ingenuity began to rise, sparked by an impulse of defiance. General Harris made the call. Launch everything we have, every missile, every satellite. We're not letting them take us without a fight. And with that, the first missiles were launched, hurled toward the unknown, toward the alien vessel that loomed above them like a god. The world held its breath, but the missiles didn't even reach their target. They exploded mid-flight, disintegrating into sparks that vanished into thin air. It was as if the alien ship had never been there at all, its presence so vast, so advanced, that the weapons of Earth were meaningless. Yet, the resistance was not over. Humanity's instinct to survive, to fight back, was far from broken. The failure of their initial attack only fueled their resolve. As cities burned and governments fell, the resistance shifted tactics. It was no longer about firepower. It was about survival. The fight had only just begun. And in the silence that followed the failed attempts, one thing became clear. Earth wasn't just fighting an alien force. It was fighting its own fear, its own uncertainty, and for the first time, the world saw what they were truly made of. They thought it was over. It wasn't. The war had only begun, and Earth had a long way to go before it understood the full scale of what was at stake. But as the first wave of resistance forces formed, the alien ship began to move. It wasn't leaving. No, the aliens were waiting for something. And in that terrifying moment, Earth realized they were now part of a larger game, one with no clear winner in sight. For the first time, humanity understood what true powerlessness felt like. But it was also the first time they truly felt what it meant to fight for their existence, and they would fight until there was nothing left.